therapist Kristen Jacobson.
Hey everyone, I'm Kristen, the anxiety therapist, and this week's topic is avoidance coping. When we struggle with anxiety, we're often prone to avoid the things that elicit that fear or that anxiety in us. And so avoidance coping or avoidance behaviors refer to the things that we do, or more precisely, the things we don't do, in order to dodge dealing with stressful situations. So this might look like procrastinating on important tasks, or avoiding tough conversations, or steering clear of situations that might make us anxious. And it's like seeing a huge mess in your room, but then choosing to just shut the door and deal with it later, or maybe even never. And so on the surface, it might seem like avoidance gives you a break from the stress, right? There's no confrontation, there's no immediate discomfort, no problem, right? But not exactly. Avoidance can actually ramp up anxiety over time. And so I want to dive into the why and the how behind this. So at its core, avoidance coping really messes with how our brains handle fear and stress. When you dodge something that scares you, you get this quick hit of relief, right? It's that instant gratification. It feels good in the moment. But this relief is very fleeting. And according to research, avoiding fears really only reinforces them. So, for example, let's say you're scared of dogs and you cross the street every time you see one. You never actually get the chance to learn that not all dogs will cause harm. And so your brain sort of gets stuck in this all dogs are a threat mode, which can then increase your overall anxiety. And neurologically speaking, when you avoid things, you're basically telling your brain, hey, this is dangerous, keep it on the blacklist. And so this actually strengthens and reinforces the neural pathways associated with fear, making that anxiety reflex a lot stronger and more automatic. So it's sort of like your brain's default setting then becomes one of high alert. Let's give some examples of avoidance coping. One might be, let's say you're anxious about public speaking, and so you decide to skip a big presentation at work. In the short term, that might be a huge sigh of relief, right? But in the long term, your boss might not be impressed, colleagues might have to pick up the slack, and then that opportunity for professional growth gets missed. And the next time you need to speak up, the anxiety is still there, and it's probably even more intense because now you have that sort of anticipatory anxiety fueling it even more, where we continually build that anxiety in our minds the longer we go in between experiencing it. Another example would be someone who avoids opening bills or bank statements because they're stressed about finances. So ignoring these is not going to make the debt disappear, but rather, it will likely accumulate more interest, and then the stress of the unknowns continues to build, feeding into this cycle of anxiety and avoidance. So avoidance coping can be pretty sneaky. It often feels like the easiest path at the moment, but just creating awareness and developing more adaptive coping strategies can help this habit from essentially making things worse. So here's some effective ways to keep this avoidance at bay. The first is to increase awareness. So the first step in changing any behavior is recognizing when and why you're doing it. So pay attention to the times that you find yourself pulling away from something stressful. Is it maybe in specific situations or with a particular person? Identifying these patterns can clue you in on when you're likely to resort to avoidance. Number 2 is develop mindfulness. So mindfulness teaches you to stay present and engage with your experiences without judgment. And so oftentimes when we are engaging in avoidance coping, we're trying to push that anxiety away, right? And usually that just makes it come on stronger. So if we can practice mindfulness and observe those feelings of anxiety or fear without immediately reacting to them, this can help reduce the perceived intensity of the emotions and make them feel more manageable and less likely to push you toward avoidance. They'll just kind of flow through you a little bit more easily versus when we try to fight against them, they come on stronger. Number 3 is to start small. So, we don't want to face all of our fears head on, especially if those fears have been avoided for a long time. So just begin with small, less threatening aspects of whatever you're avoiding. So for example, if you're avoiding looking at your finances, maybe start by just opening up your banking app and browsing through it daily without necessarily making any changes or doing anything. And small steps can build your confidence and reduce the overall anxiety that is linked to that situation. Number 4 is use problem-solving skills. So instead of avoiding a problem, try to address it directly and take action. Action is super important. So, break the problem into manageable parts and develop a plan for tackling each piece. So let's say you're stressed about a project. You might want to outline the steps you need to complete, set deadlines, seek resources to help you. When you're focused on solutions, you shift your energy from avoidance to action. I actually have a client right now I was talking to the other day, and he's going through a divorce, so kind of phoning it in at work, and his email and voicemails have started to build up. And so now he's kind of using avoidance as a coping mechanism. So we talked about ways that he can carve out time specifically to dedicate to one task and work his way through this backlog of emails and voicemails so that it doesn't continue to build. Number 5 is seek support. So sometimes avoidance can be challenging to tackle alone. And so seeking support from friends, family, professionals, they can help you with new perspectives and resources. And I had a client today who she had a professional organizer come in and help her go through the stuff in her home and decide what to purge, what to keep, and all of that. And I think a lot of people struggle with that in terms of things just like piling up at home and sort of being paralyzed with, okay, I don't even know where to start. Like, how do I go through this? So I'm just gonna push that to the side. I know I've definitely been doing that with my closet for probably about a year now, right? It feels so overwhelming that I don't even want to go there to try to clear that out and purge stuff. Number 6 is practicing exposure. So exposure therapy is a component of cognitive behavioral therapy, and it involves gradual exposure to the source of your fear in a controlled and safe way. So maybe if you have a fear of public speaking, you might start by speaking in front of a mirror, then speaking to a small group, and then slowly building up to larger audiences. And this consistent exposure can really desensitize you to that stimuli and situation, which ultimately decreases your overall anxiety. So there are times when avoidance coping is actually healthy. And so this is important to acknowledge that it's not always a negative coping strategy. There are situations in which it can be protective and rational. So let's say you're in a toxic work environment that consistently undermines your mental health. Stepping back or even deciding to leave can be a form of healthy avoidance, right? In this case, avoidance acts as a shield, protecting your emotional well-being. Similarly, avoiding certain conversations or situations that you know will escalate into conflict can be wise, especially if the conditions aren't right for a productive dialogue. I think we can all probably identify at least one person in our lives where they're highly reactive, they are challenging to talk to, and sometimes not engaging is actually the better option. And so in these cases, avoidance helps maintain peace and gives you time to maybe prepare better for addressing the issue in a more controlled or thoughtful manner. So essentially, avoidance coping turns healthy when it's used selectively and strategically to protect yourself from harm, or to sort of choose your battles wisely in situations where the emotional cost will outweigh the benefits. And recognizing when to use avoidance in this way can actually reflect a high level of emotional intelligence and self-care. So I would love to hear about your experiences with avoidance coping. I think it's super common. I'm sure we've all done it at some point. So leave a comment, or if you have a question, feel free to ask that, and be sure to subscribe to my channel. Take care.